Hi everybody, and a warm welcome to our fourth episode of Superpowers ReLoaded. The topic for today is shaping the new normal by applying neuroscience. I'm super excited for this version. Together with the Future Academy, so this is today Mish, Markus, and Steffi, we created this event series for all founders, innovators, and people who want to develop their personal skills. And if you missed the first sessions, don't worry, they will be available on our learning video platform on our website. So you can check it out. If it's not there already from the last session, it will be very soon, and this one as well. I'm Therese, the events and comms manager from Wayra. And why is the new normal so important to us? We're living it now in our daily lives due to COVID-19 and have to find the best way to shape it to our needs. Our main goal at Wayra is to connect startups with our mother company, Telefonica. We do that with paid pilot projects for the startups over 4 months. The goal is to win Telefonica as the client for startups and to sign the commercial contract. Our main focus scouting areas are, for example, IoT, 5G, and many more, of course. You can find them also on our website. So if you're interested, just go to wayra.de. Besides that, we have a big community of over 70 members sitting with us in our lovely office in the heart of Munich. That's where we also met the Future Academy because they are long-term residents already. Especially for growing companies like startups, execution power, and all other powers we deal with in our sessions are essential for our success. However, we all work in teams on a daily basis, so we believe it's a superpower that everybody should have. I'm super happy to have Markus, CEO and co-founder of the Future Academy, and Mish with me here today. They are part of the Wayra community, and he and his team develop a framework of the core competencies essential for the 21st century. While the two will guide you through today's session, I will be in the back supporting with a smooth run-through. So if you have any questions or any struggles with Zoom or anything you want to know about Wayra, just chat with me in the chat of Zoom or contact me directly as you wish. We prepared challenging and insightful content for you, and we all know the feeling of getting distracted by email, Slack, WhatsApp, and whatsoever. So I would highly recommend to close all the other stuff you have open on your laptop or your mobile phone next to you. Maybe you can just turn it around so you can really concentrate and get the best out of the session for you. If you have any questions, of course, always just ask, but maybe in the chat, so we won't disturb Mish and Markus. So that's it from my side. Markus, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Therese. Well, first of all, welcome, guys. It's great to see you, or some of you at least. Yes, so as you know, we're running this in partnership with Wayra. Big thanks to the Wayra community and the Wayra people to facilitate or help us facilitate this. Essentially, the way we structure the content is really around what we call the 4 superpowers of the 21st century. Steffi and I came up with this idea because we sort of realized very early on when we started the business that when you go to school, a lot of the stuff you learn at school has nothing to do with reality and practical life. So we came up with these 4 superpowers. I don't want to go into a lot of detail because some of you have already heard of them. But in a nutshell, the responsive mindset is really all about, in a really difficult and complex world, how do you sort of keep your own mental hygiene going? So we use tools such as mindfulness and resilience to make sure that, and we teach these obviously as part of the Academy offering, to make sure that you've got a strong, resilient base. The second one is team intelligence, which actually we're going to talk about today, or in particular, Mish is going to cover. Execution power is all about, having the tools to launch your innovation really, really fast. And the last one is around digital fitness. You'd be surprised how many people are still struggling, even though we live in a digital society, but using some of the most basic digital tools. So this is what the 4 superpowers are all about. But really today we're going to mainly focus on team intelligence. So what today's is really more a taster. We've got a shared learning experience for you, which means that it's going to be highly interactive. It would be boring if only one person or two people would speak. It's much more interesting if you get a chance actually to connect amongst each other. And so what we're trying to do is really make the most out of our time today. So you have an opportunity to ask in the chat window. So please ask as much as possible. I will make sure while Mish is talking that we keep track of it and then sort of divert the question back to Mish, or even I can answer it. We also have some breakout rooms prepared, so you might meet some people that you have never met before, where you can sort of solve very brief questions and challenges. Of course, you're going to get the slides from us, but obviously you can also take screenshots if you like. And of course, you've got your hands also. So with that, and without further ado, what I would like to do is really hand over to Mr. Mish, our neuroscientist, to talk about... Oh, no, sorry, I'm first. A bit too fast. I've got a very quick check-in question for you. And I would be interested, really from the depth of your heart, is there anything that really annoys you to work remotely? Something that pisses you off deeply? If there is anything like this, what I would like you to do now is just briefly comment in the chat window, please. Be very interested to see what your comments would be. We all had this experience where we thought, oh, this is quite cool, and we kind of get used to it. But I was recently saying to a friend that it's enough now. We need more face-to-face stuff again, if possible. But hey, this is the current situation. So what I would like to do now, I think now, Mish, is your time, is hand over to Mish to tell us a little bit more about how the brain actually is being impacted by working remotely. Over to you.
Thanks, Marcus. And it's so nice to see so many faces on the screen, and lovely to get to spend a bit of time talking about such an important topic. I don't know where you are at the moment. I guess some of you are in Germany. I'm also in Europe. And so with a second wave and possible more lockdowns, but right around the world, we're all suddenly going face-to-face virtual, face-to-face virtual. How on earth do you sustain the momentum in a team? How do you sustain the joy in your own life? This is the skill and the challenge that we're wanting to build. I come to this with 3 different hats on my head, which is why I've lost all my hair from taking all the hats on and off. I'm head of consulting at the Future Academy, which is a joy and a privilege, and get to be part of the Wayra community. That's through the Future Academy's partnership with the Neuropower Group. And we're neuroscientists, behavioral specialists, psychologists, and our passion is around humanizing work. So how can we create teams and workplaces where we get things done, but do it in a way that we're actually healthier and feeling more psychologically well and more human at the end of the day. And in my spare time, I get to be on the faculty of the Singularity University, looking at how technology is changing our world. So we've been campaigning for a long time for people to adopt all of these video conferencing technologies like Zoom, and working with many different organizations to encourage them to take on these new ways of working, using neuroscience as a way of saying, how can we make the process of learning easier? And so many of these organizations that we all recognize have been taking the technology and trying to push a faster adoption. And then, of course, in March this year, all of us suddenly had a very good reason to adopt new technologies, whether we wanted to or not. And there was the surprise and shock of adjusting. And there was a race to set up our work from home and get better chairs and a second screen on our desk. And many of us have been through a bit of an emotional roller coaster, the ups and downs. But from what we've seen across all these different organizations, there are a few themes that are now starting to emerge, a few challenges with how we work virtually with our teams. The first is visibility. And I think a few of you have touched on that already. How do I know how my team is going? How do I get a sense or a read? Because it's very different having someone in the other office compared to having them in another city or country where there's no line of sight. The second is vitality. And this is about the energy and the joy. How do I keep the mood up when I'm just at a computer screen every day? And a lot of what we're going to be talking about, centers around how you can address a couple of those challenges. But there's a third one that we're just starting to see emerging now. And I'm curious about whether you've seen this too, which is this question around investment. One of the things we know about the human brain is that it puts energy on the people and the places where we spend most time. And we pretty quickly find out where's the energy that's going to help sustain us. And I was thinking back just a week or so ago when I was talking about the brain and what it needs to perform, and someone said, you know what, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get this in my work. Can I get it somewhere else? And the answer is, yeah, absolutely. And from a personal health perspective, getting your brain's needs met is foundational. But if it's not coming from our work anymore, why would people invest the extra effort? And as we all find our own ways to adapt and find a new normal for ourselves, a lot of the things that our workplaces used to do for us, perhaps people are finding it elsewhere. So if you're a founder of a startup or a leader in a team, whether it's a team of 10 or 10,000, this question around, one, how do we help people be productive? Sure, how do we make sure they're connected? But then what is the role and purpose of our organizations? How do we make sure they stay relevant? That's a real challenge. And so for our first breakout discussion, I'd be really curious for you to spend a couple of minutes talking with one or two other people, reflecting on the last few months. What have you been finding either easy and joyful or challenging about the move to virtual? There's the stuff that irritates us and we're adapting, but what's your team learned? What's it doing well? And what are you finding tricky? We're going to give you 4 or 5 minutes just to have a quick discussion, and then we'll get you to come back and let us know where the skills already are in this group. If we have a look then around what we're wanting to cover today in terms of content, and I've got a fair few slides to cover. What I'm hoping that we can talk about is to just scratch the surface on some of the things that you can focus on as a leader to help a virtual team to thrive. And I want to talk first about why virtual teams don't work by accident. And some of you have no doubt found this. And the reason they don't work by accident is because of your brain and what it needs. What I want to then talk about are some of the hidden needs that every brain has, and a really useful, quick check that you can do to ask, is my team getting the right things? And then the third thing I want to do is look at, how you can put that into practice in terms of a week. And it would be nice if there was one golden formula that will work for every team. Unfortunately, there's not. But there are some themes that we've been noticing around the amount of time we allocate and whether or not we're actually getting the value from our team time. And so I want to talk a little bit about those too. So if we were to get started and talk first about why teams don't work by accident virtually. And it's because the human brain is social. Now, I'm a social neuroscientist, and so I'm particularly fascinated and have always been in what happens in your brain when you're in the room with another person. And what we've learned over the last 20 years in particular is that the human brain is wired and adapted to live in tribes. And this is great because it means that you don't have to be good at everything yourself. But this ability to collaborate and the ability to achieve through working with other people also means that your brain is hardwired to take data from the people around you and use that data to shape and guide your performance. In other words, we achieve things by working with other people, but your brain also needs other people to get into the right state to perform. And so one of the biggest barriers we've got is how do we get the same level of information and input from our colleagues and from our friends when we're in this virtual environment? Now, video gamers actually have a bit of an advantage here. And if you've ever wondered, why is it that someone, say last year would spend 8 hours at work at a computer, come home exhausted, and then spend another 4 or 5 hours on their computer playing games with somebody on the other side of the world? It's because video game designers have been looking at how to hack this social brain for quite a while. Now, it turns out that the average gamer is only 34 years old, so they're not actually a kid anymore. And it turns out that many millions and millions of people play games overnight. And it's because these video game designers have been hacking the social brain. You don't need to memorize this slide. I've just jumped through a couple of slides quickly. But this gives you an idea of the kinds of things that a game designer looks at when they're designing an interaction. And most of it has nothing to do with the stuff that we get through Zoom, right? On a Zoom, you get some of this, you get the words people say, you get maybe the para language, which is about tone of voice and is the person speaking fast or slow. But there are all kinds of other things that we would use in game design to create a character. How's my team going? The environmental details, physical appearance, where someone's standing in relation to you, and even olfactics. Over in the top left is an interesting one. This is your smell. It's not nice to talk about, but it turns out that everyone's bodies are sort of releasing these pheromones, and these give us really important cues that wake the brain up and tell us that something important is happening. And so when we used to sit in an office, and if you're still getting to sit in the office and you're working as a team, the guess is you get about 2,000 pieces of information a second that are going into the brain to tell you what's going on. And you can see in this one, right, who's interested and engaged and who's a bit nervous, who's important to the discussion and who's not, who's feeling impatient and not. We get all of this information until all of a sudden that meeting's happening behind Zoom, right? And now all of a sudden it's not just that, some of us have got slow internet, so it's a bit gappy and lossy. Overall, there's a fraction of the data that your brain needs. So that's one challenge. We're not getting the right information. The second challenge is that once you're looking at a computer screen, we've discovered that it pushes the information in through a different part of your brain. That brain that I've got there as a picture has some blue bits and some pink bits. The pink bits are to do with how you understand other people and connect with other people. So when you get a hug, or when you think about your grandparents, or when you try and understand what a team member is thinking, those are all the parts of the brain that light up. And the blue parts are the ones that we use for spreadsheets and maths and calculations and reading. And it turns out that when we look through a computer screen, the information starts being processed by those blue areas, by those system maths processing parts of the brain. And so what it means is that even if we're getting the right information, someone's telling us how they're feeling, the blood has been pushed into the wrong parts of our brain. And so what we have is this empathy gap online. When we spend all our day staring at the Zoom screen, eventually the blood flows out of the empathy parts of our brain. And that means we have less connection with ourselves and less connection with other people. And so the first thing that you need to do for yourself and others as a leader is learn how to switch back from the data system to your empathy system. Now, you need to do this a lot between every meeting, between, long spaces of time when you're doing analysis work and when you then go back to connect with people. I don't know if you ever remember if you were deep in budgeting or programming or whatever it is you might have been doing when you were in an office and someone suddenly arrived at the door and you go, oh, hang on a second, that's a person. I need to talk to them, even though I want to finish my spreadsheet. That actually happens in your brain all the time when you're in this Zoom space. There are lots of ways you can do it. Close your laptop, even though very few of us actually do close our laptop during the day. Don't take a break and switch across to reading the news or social or catching up on your email. Every hour, or certainly every 2 hours, stand up and take a stretch. You need to feel your feet, get your heart rate moving, and take a long, deep breath. Now, if you've got a mindfulness practice or yoga or something, that's fantastic too. But at a minimum, you need to be getting away from the screen. And then when you're talking to people, you need to ask, how am I feeling? And how are they feeling? And how can we understand each other better? And if you ask yourself in a meeting, how's this person actually feeling right now? And the voice in your head says, I don't know, and I don't really care. I just want to get the work done. Then that's a dead giveaway that all the blood's gone into this system, data system, and out of the empathy system, and it's time to trigger back. That last dot point on the slide is also really important. When we're in a virtual environment and we're struggling with this connection and meaning and empathy, be careful how much time you use in meetings sharing data instead of building connection. In other words, if you've got a whole bunch of information you need people to know, try and build it so you send the data out ahead of time, get people to pre-read it, and use this precious time face-to-face on building shared understanding, shared discussion. So that's hack number one, is to learn to switch from data to empathy. And it's because of this online empathy gap. Of course, whether you're online or face-to-face, good leaders know how to close that empathy gap. So even if the work of the team is very analytical, and even if they are in the middle of doing a budget spreadsheet, somehow they manage to make sure that people feel connected and included. And it's because good leaders are able to satisfy the brain's social needs. And so many of you may have found techniques to do this when you've been face-to-face, even if you don't know the science behind it. Now, this is a really rich area. And so, we can give you some reference books if you like. One of the ones that I've contributed to is about 1,000 pages long. But if we pull back from the 1,000 pages and say, what's a simple rule that you can use in your head? The first thing you need to be looking at as a leader is the team mechanics. And this is where leadership meets management. So does everyone have everything they need to get the work done? Does everyone know what they're supposed to be doing? Where do we store information? How do people's roles fit together? All that kind of stuff. Now, what's really interesting is that we've discovered that this isn't just important for doing the work, for performance and management. This kind of clarity is also critical for motivation and for the psychological well-being of your people, because it gives the brain something that it craves and needs, which is psychological safety. And when you get psychological safety, you have the foundation of all team performance. So what the brain's looking for as a first fundamental need is to understand, what are the rules? Am I valued as part of the team? Am I safe within the team? And do I belong to this group? And when you don't have this sense of belonging, your serotonin levels drop. And, for any of you who've made a shift from going into the office every day, seeing the team every day, having your office right in the middle of the team, to all of a sudden being in an apartment by yourself or with one other person and trying to remote in. And if you're finding that your energy is a bit flat, part of it is because you've been relying on the team for that baseline serotonin. When you don't have enough serotonin, we have a word for that, clinical depression. And it turns out that serotonin is one of the key drivers of our baseline emotional mood. So this is a really important need to look at. Now, it's not a curse. You can adjust to your new home working space, but it does take some effort. And it's because the way we used to satisfy this need, do I belong? Am I safe? Am I part of the group? Used to be all done through the face-to-face. It was a one-on-one with your manager or team meetings, and you'd learn the rules of the tribe and you'd learn to fit in by watching other people. Are you allowed to print in color? We'll watch and see what happens when you print for the first time and you'll get feedback. What time are we allowed to leave at the end of the day? Just tap someone on the shoulder and ask them, and they'll give you a smile and say, well, officially we leave here, but I'll tell you a secret. Actually, as long as the manager's gone, blah, 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 blah. All of these little things which signal that we're part of the tribe. Now, how many of us are still having those kinds of conversations now that we're all having Zoom meetings? So what it means is your task as a leader is to over-focus on this and to be as explicit and clear about all of this as you can. And the golden rule is, when in doubt, do it a bit more. Be clear on purpose, why people are in the meeting. Why did you invite that person specifically, and what's the role that you want them to play? What are our values as a team, and how can we live them? All of these are critical. And when you get it right, you have the team mechanics, and people say, I feel safe and valued. I feel in control, and I feel like I'm making progress and good use of my time because I know what to do and I have the things I need to do it. And all of that's really important, but it's not enough. And the reason it's not enough is because there are two very different systems in the brain. A rational system that wants to know the mechanics, and an emotional system that's much more interested in the dynamics. So it's important for your brain to feel safe and valued and like you have a clear role. But it also wants to be excited about the role that you have and interested in the work to be done. We want to feel in control and able to achieve, but we also want to feel supported and connected, and so on. And so we have this need for the mechanics to be right. And we also have a need for the dynamics to be right. And these dynamics are not so much about the serotonin and the adrenaline and the acetylcholine. It's more about dopamine, oxytocin. These are the drugs that those of you who like red wine or cuddling a cat, these are all the things that we get from the connection stuff. And these are just as important. Now, why is this a challenge in the virtual environment? Because masking when you're not getting these needs satisfied is much, much easier. In an office, someone comes in at the start of the day and they're feeling upset. And it's pretty easy for the team to tell. And someone asks how you're feeling and you have a chat, and someone makes a joke and we say, let's go for a quick coffee run. And all of a sudden, the external input starts to shift the dopamine levels in our brain. Whereas in a virtual environment, I turn up in the morning and someone says, how are you feeling? And I say, fine, thanks. And then I lean out of shot and I hit mute. And all I have to do is wait until I've got off screen, and now I'm disengaged and struggling for the rest of the meeting, and no one would ever know. And so what we need to be doing is asking more about how people are going and creating space for the expression to happen. Another interesting point to note is that we all went through this first shift to work from home and had, in many ways, a similar experience. Certainly the stress response, when the human brain is under very high stress, the initial responses are often quite similar. But as we come out of stress and into stabilization, people are starting to diverge. And you've got some people who are thriving and some people who are struggling. And so as a leader, to be able to be not assuming that your experience is everyone else's, and not assuming that just because two people are going well, that everyone else is doing fine. So in our team, the golden rules are, it's okay to ask how you're going at any time. And more importantly, it's okay to say how you're feeling. And that doesn't mean that it can be solved immediately. If someone's struggling and having a hard time because of personal or whatever's going on, it's not necessarily the job of the team to solve it, but to be able to express it. And as a team to say, hey, we're interested in supporting you. That has a huge impact. So there are lots of different ways that we used to look after dynamics. Face-to-face in the office, it used to be the coffee chats and the small acts of service. Someone would be working hard at the desk, and so someone else would go and get them some lunch, just as a way of showing some generosity, and that triggers oxytocin. All of us are finding different ways to meet these needs in the virtual world. But what's interesting is that, from interviews and from surveys that we've run with teams right around the world, our estimate is that for anything that you used to do face-to-face, when you try and do it virtually, it only has about 25% of the impact. In other words, you lose 50 to 75%. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean that if you used to be able to sit down with someone and have a coffee chat for 15 or 20 minutes, and at the end of the chat, you knew how they were, they knew how you were able to reconnect, and you felt like you had a good relationship, you need to allocate 4 of those kinds of sessions, possibly 4 half-hour sessions, in order to get the same impact because of this empathy gap. And so we need to allocate more time and also build the skill of starting to read each other in this low data environment. Now, I said there's no one golden rule, but of course, people are starting to innovate around this. And if you haven't seen it already, this is actually a Munich-based startup. The Mystery Coffee is about how do you create some of those impromptu coffee conversations. You add your email address in, choose if you want to be contacted weekly or monthly or something in between. And they'll even pay you up specifically with other people in the same company. I don't have any connection with these guys, but I love it because it's an example of how we're starting to adapt to this virtual environment. Is it the whole answer? No, of course not. But it's a great prompt to create some more dopamine, some more oxytocin in the way that we work in our daily life. So you've got the mechanics and the dynamics. And you need to be looking after both. Now, interestingly, when we apply these needs to customer experience, there's an awful amount of really fascinating insight. And the language we use in customer experience is about baseline and delight. In other words, you have baseline needs. What does your product do? How's it going to help? How much should it cost? Blah, 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 blah. And then you have the delight. What's unexpected and new and fun about this? How are you showing me in your customer experience that you care about me and are wanting to make my experience better? Baseline and delight. This is what every brain needs. And so for yourself or for your team, you've now got a bit of a quick tool to understand what might be happening. If you've got someone who's feeling anxious or angry or frustrated, usually that's because baseline needs aren't being met. And so you need to go back and look at things like role clarity, processes. Do we have the resources and the tools that we need? Are we feeling like we're learning and making progress? And you may need to reset some of the baseline. If people aren't feeling anxious or angry, they're saying, no, I'm fine. I just have no energy. I just don't know why I'd be bothered. It's because delight isn't being satisfied. It means there's not enough dopamine in the system. There's not enough oxytocin in the system. It means either there's not enough novelty in the work that people are doing and you need to try and find ways to make it more enjoyable, or there's too much isolation and we need to reconnect the team to try and strengthen relationships and create some more oxytocin. And so this brings us to our second breakout discussion, which I'd be really interested in you spending a few minutes chatting with someone. Where have you seen these mechanics and dynamics playing out in teams that you're a part of? And what have you seen people doing that helps you and your team stay in good shape, or have seen other people using to help their team stay in good shape? I want you to talk about this concept, because once you get it, it makes it much easier to keep an eye on how your team is doing. So we'll give you 5 minutes to chat with someone new, and then we'll come back and get a comment from each person in there. So mechanics and dynamics, or baseline and delight. At a really simple level, this explains a whole lot of our experience at work, at home, and you may be able to see from your discussions how baseline might be okay, not so sure about delight, or vice versa. Interestingly, they're quite independent needs. Now, we said it was a taster, and so just to touch on, for those of you who are interested, those 6 statements link each one to one of these 6 needs, one of these 6 circuits in the brain. And again, not to memorize, but just to give you an idea, the need to belong is what drives the serotonin. The need to express is linked to dopamine, but also creativity and novelty. And so when you ask that question around baseline and delight, what you're really asking is there enough for each of these circuits in my brain for me to be enjoying, but also having the right neurochemicals to perform? And that's why it's such a powerful place to start asking the question around how your team's doing. But the goal of today is not that you memorize 6 needs, and is not that you know the neurotransmitters, although they're interesting. It's to say, what 1 or 2 things might you do differently for your team? And so my strong advice as a starting point would be to audit the time that you're using. You know, when we first really started about this 4 months ago, 5 months ago, people were rushing and saying, okay, we're going to need a virtual stand-up. We're going to need a something. Now a lot of us have got the time in the diary. My question would be, are you actually allocating enough time now that we know you're losing 50 to 75%? And when you allocate time for the team, are you biasing too much to the mechanics or to the dynamics? And so I'm not wanting to present this as a golden example, but just to give you an idea of what ended up working for our team. Because we had a team of about 20, we have a team of about 20. And a leadership team of 4. And we used to meet as a leadership team once every month or so, and everything else was by Slack. Once we moved to virtual, we found that we actually needed to meet once a morning and once in the afternoon. And it wasn't so much because there was critical work to be done. It was because we were connecting on the dynamic stuff. How are you feeling? How am I feeling? We had our team huddle in the beginning and the team hurrah at the end. The pattern here is focus it on 3 things: a good beginning, a good middle, and a good end. So at the start of the week, make sure you don't just focus on the tasks. Fill the gap that's been left by the fact that people aren't meeting around the coffee table and that they're not coming in with a tan or a sprained ankle because they were snowboarding on the weekend or whatever it is. Create space at the start of the week so that people can be connecting as humans and doing some of the delight or some of the mechanics. In the middle, have a think about how you're encouraging people to learn, to connect and to reflect with each other. You're probably already doing the one-on-one check-ins. Make sure they're not just about the work, they're actually about the people. And also ask that question, how can you create some shared experiences around learning so the discussion's not just about deliverables and pressure? And make sure you're doing something to celebrate the week and to finish the week. One of the strongest pieces of feedback we've heard right around the world is that we used to use driving to work and leaving work as a way to bookend the week. And so even those of us who work from home or even those of us who, take emails after hours used to get some joy from packing up the laptop, having a drink at the end of the Friday and saying goodbye. We need to look at how we recreate some of those experiences for ourselves and for our people. And then the final bit is make sure that you're actively managing your brain's health. And as a neuroscientist, I'd say managing your dopamine and oxytocin and adrenaline. And so the tip here is to start modeling healthy brain behaviors because it starts with you. So very close now to being a sort of a formal recommendation. At a minimum, you need to be having a 5-minute break every hour. Get up and stretch, or 10 minutes every 2 hours. What are you doing every day to recharge the dopamine? And don't see that as slacking off. That's actually a critical thing that you need to do to keep your brain working. And then also encourage the mindfulness, the group events and all those kinds of things. And so there are 4 places to start. Learn to switch from the data system to the empathy system. Learn to spot a baseline problem versus a delight problem. Learn how to audit the team time that you're using and make sure that it's working, and then start to model these brain healthy behaviors, because people won't necessarily feel comfortable doing it for themselves. And so that's the content we wanted to cover. And we're just a couple of minutes off the hour. What I'd love you to do is take a minute just to reflect. You've heard an enthusiastic Australian talking for 30 or so minutes now. What do you want to take away from that? And it doesn't need to be everything. What's one thing or 2 things that stand out for you? And it would be really great for all the rest of us if you were to type that into the chat, just so we get a sense of what each of us found most interesting and what as a group we've learned. What are some things to be thinking about? The first is that this is the future, and it's not going to be fully virtual or fully face-to-face. It's going to be hybrid. So learning this skill so that you can meet the needs face-to-face or virtual is critical. We've all been through a period where we've been focusing on the technology. But if you're a leader, your task now is to shift away from focusing on the technology to focusing on the human experience. In the same way that Apple changed things for us when they said it's not about the processor and the RAM, it's actually about the experience of holding the phone. As a leader, it's not about the Zoom functionality. It's about whether or not our agenda is creating connection and time and space for people to collaborate. The good news in all of this is that you don't actually need to have all the answers, because people are more ready than ever for co-creation. And if you ask the question, how can we create more connection? How can we create more dopamine? People will come up with new and interesting and clever ways to fill that space. And so your role as a leader is not to be directing the connection or directing the dynamics, but asking the question and making sure that the team focus their brains on it. So nice to meet all of you, and good luck. If you're interested, we're looking forward to connecting with you more. And I might hand back over to Marcus just to wrap us up.
Well, thank you very much, Mish. You almost landed on the dot, so it's 2 minutes prior.
But with no 5-minute break. I'm sorry.
Very good. Well, thank you guys for being here. I think it was really inspiring. Great talk. Thank you also for the interactive sessions. And with this, I might just head back to Therese.
Yes. So thanks a lot, Mish. I think we all learned a lot. and we definitely will take something with us. I will definitely do more breaks. So in our team, we already do like 3 times a week check-ins and also check-outs on Friday afternoon or around lunchtime. And we established a coffee break where we just chit-chat. So this is right after our session now, where we just within the Wayra team have like half an hour blocked weekly, where we just have a coffee together and talk about anything but work. So that's definitely something I can recommend. It's really nice just to have like also the personal chat. So thanks a lot, and thanks a lot for all of you to participate in our session. I already posted the link for the next and last session with Markus and Steffi. We'd be really happy to see you there again.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.